Dear friends, welcome to another thrilling episode of The Informant Military. Today we delve into the alleged presence of Cuban and Russian mercenaries bolstering the police and repressive forces of dictator Nicolás Maduro. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. The brazen electoral fraud orchestrated by Nicolás Maduro in Venezuela was a meticulously planned process that began months ago. It started with the imprisonment, disqualification, and removal of key political opponents, most notably Maria Corina Machado, who was declared ineligible for 15 years by Maduro-controlled courts. In addition to targeting his opponents, the Chavista regime imposed censorship, persecuting journalists, websites, magazines, newspapers, and radio stations, while blocking access to numerous independent news blogs and sites across the country. Despite these actions, Nicolás Maduro was defeated in the July 28 presidential elections. The opposition presented over 80% of the tallies, showing Edmundo González with 67% of the votes, while Maduro received only 30%. Nevertheless, without providing evidence, the CNE, National Electoral Council, entirely under Maduro's control, declared the dictator the winner. Essentially, Maduro, who effectively counts the votes in Venezuela, simply claimed victory, accusing the opposition of fascism and an attempted coup. The events in Venezuela before, during, and immediately after the elections resemble a step-by-step manual on how to rig elections. Now, days after the elections, with Maduro still refusing to provide proof of his victory, the country is entering the phase of opposition repression, involving mandatory police force and violence. As I've mentioned in previous videos on this channel, Maduro has complete control over Venezuela's police and military forces, thanks to mass promotions that have turned the country into one with the highest number of high-ranking officers globally. To showcase their unconditional support, the commanders, led by Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino Lopez, released a video accusing the opposition of being part of an alleged international fascist far-right movement aiming to overthrow Maduro, who holds power illegally by refusing to prove he received the votes he claims.
Estamos en presencia, sencillamente así lo digo, de un golpe de Estado. Reafirmamos la más absoluta lealtad y apoyo incondicional al ciudadano Nicolás Maduro Moros, presidente constitucional de la República Bolivariana de Venezuela, nuestro comandante en jefe, quien ha sido legítimamente reelecto por el poder popular y proclamado por el poder electoral para el periodo presidencial 2025-2031. En este país habrá paz, paz y paz.
Beyond controlling the armed and police forces, Maduro also has a firm grip on Venezuelan institutions, especially the courts, which since Hugo Chávez's rise to power in 1999, have been filled entirely with jurists aligned with the Chavista regime. With full control of the security forces and courts, Maduro is now moving to the next phase, brutal and violent repression of the opposition to crush any dissenting voices against the dictatorship. The regime's narrative to justify violent actions against protesters is the alleged coup d'état, which the Venezuelan military claims is funded by foreign powers. Using this justification, Venezuelan security forces violently suppress all protests, with the courts detaining and threatening anyone caught in these protests with up to 30 years in prison. Reports indicate that over 1,000 people have been detained since July 28th. However, if the opposition's significant lead in the elections is confirmed, Maduro will face an outraged populace comprising nearly 70% of the population. Venezuelan forces alone may not suffice to confront such a large number of opponents, which is why, according to various photos and videos, mercenaries from countries like Cuba and Russia are operating in Venezuela. The Cuban regime, heavily sanctioned by the United States, has limited commercial and economic options. Legally, Cuba can only trade with other sanctioned nations, with Venezuela being the nearest and most accessible. Thus, it is in Cuba's best interest that Nicolás Maduro's dictatorship remains. Though precise numbers of alleged Cuban military personnel in Venezuela are unavailable, Videos and local testimonies confirm the presence of Cuban units. Regarding the Russians, the first evidence of mercenary presence emerged after the 2017 protests, with clearer proof surfacing in early 2019. Reuters cited 3 distinct sources mentioning an unspecified number of Wagner Group mercenaries operating in the country. According to these sources, the Russian mercenaries were tasked with protecting Nicolás Maduro and top regime members, a mission that reportedly expanded over time to include training Venezuelan units and even reinforcing special operations like kidnapping and neutralizing opponents. At that time, the Wagner Group was still led by its founder, Yevgeny Prigozhin. After his elimination in August 2023, the group came under direct Kremlin control, with Vladimir Putin using these mercenaries to expand Russian presence and influence in regions like the African Sahel and, of course, Venezuela. Both Russia and Cuba have vested interest in keeping Maduro in power. For Russia, the interest is strategic rather than commercial, considering Maduro's rivalry with the United States. Russia understands that if Maduro falls, a US-aligned politician is likely to rise to power. Thus, as long as Maduro remains in control, instability will persist in the region, forcing the United States to keep a watchful eye on the Caribbean, especially now that Maduro is taking steps towards invading Guyana to annex the oil-rich Essequibo region. Maduro's animosity towards the United States and the threat of an invasion in South America are crucial elements for Vladimir Putin, as they compel the Pentagon to allocate resources to this region that could otherwise be deployed to areas of Russian interest, such as Ukraine and the Black Sea. Therefore, numerous videos and local testimonies confirm that Cuban and Russian military personnel are indeed operating in Venezuela, with Cubans likely reinforcing Venezuelan lines by increasing the number of agents and combatants, while Russians focus on protecting Maduro, top regime members, strategic installations like ports, airports, and refineries, and training local forces and conducting special operations. Stay tuned for more updates and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for the latest analyses and information on the world's most critical geopolitical issues.
Mira, la única estatua de Chávez que no han tumbado es esta. Y la van a tumbar de bola. Ya hoy menos, no jodas.
No pudieron anoche, ya no pueden.
No pueden. Y ahorita están diluidos.
Esta información es de hoy, martes 30 de julio. Lo que ven en el video es la zona del 23 de enero, que está siendo tomada no por colectivos. Estas son las famosas avispas negras que están llegando desde Cuba. Ya se ha documentado extensamente el tráfico aéreo entre Cuba y Venezuela. Se han dado casi que 32 vuelos desde hace 2 días. Como no se creen las Fuerzas Armadas de Venezuela, están encerradas y tienen bloqueo comunicacional, todo está en manos de estos tipos. Ni siquiera los colectivos, pues los colectivos se le voltearon también al gobierno de Maduro.